Welcome, history lovers, to our new series exploring the incredible life of one of America's greatest heroes, Harriet Tubman. To truly understand the giant she became, we must first step back in time, into the world she was born into. This is Chapter 1, the world Harriet was born into. Imagine a time, around the year 1822, in Dorchester County, Maryland. This wasn't just a place on a map. It was a battleground of human spirit against a system of unimaginable cruelty. It was here, in the midst of this darkness, that a baby girl named Araminta Ross was born. We know her today as Harriet. She was born not as a free citizen, but as property. Her first breath was not one of freedom, but of bondage. From the very beginning, her life was dictated by the brutal reality of slavery. Maryland, though a border state, was deeply entrenched in this system. The economy, especially on the eastern shore where Harriet lived, was heavily reliant on the forced labor of enslaved people. They worked the tobacco fields, the timber yards, and the sprawling plantations that dotted the landscape. Harriet's world was one defined by the crack of the whip, the grueling heat of the sun, and the constant gnawing ache of exhaustion. Life on the Broadus plantation, where Harriet and her family were enslaved, was a daily struggle for survival. Imagine waking before the sun even thought about rising, not to the gentle light of dawn, but to the harsh call to labor. For children, there was no gentle childhood. From as young as 5 or 6, they were put to work. Little Harriet's first jobs were domestic tasks, like housekeeping and watching over the master's baby. This might sound less strenuous than field work, but it came with its own unique terror. She was under constant, watchful eyes, where any mistake, any cry from the baby, could result in a brutal whipping. She carried the scars of these early years, both physical and emotional, for the rest of her life. The living conditions were a reflection of their status as property. Enslaved families were crammed into small, crude log cabins with dirt floors. They had little more than rags for clothing and a meager, insufficient diet, usually consisting of cornmeal and a small portion of salted pork or fish. This wasn't just about saving money for the enslavers. It was a deliberate tool of control. A population kept weak, hungry, and exhausted is a population less likely to resist. Yet, even in these dire conditions, they found ways to supplement their diets. Hunting, fishing, and gardening in their precious few moments of free time, demonstrating a resilience that the system was designed to crush. The psychological toll was just as immense as the physical one. The ever-present threat of the auction block was a shadow that loomed over every single family. Imagine loving your parents, your siblings, your children, with the constant, terrifying knowledge that at any moment they could be sold away, never to be seen again. This was not a distant fear, it was a horrifying reality. Harriet herself witnessed this unspeakable trauma. 3 of her own sisters, Lina, Soph, and Maria Riddy, were sold and taken away, tearing a gaping hole in the fabric of their family. The screams of a mother being ripped from her child, the silent tears of a husband watching his wife be chained and led away, this was the soundtrack to life in slavery. This constant threat of separation was one of the most diabolical aspects of the system. It was a strategic weapon used to break spirits and dismantle the core unit of human society, the family. It created an environment of perpetual grief and instability. How do you build a future? How do you dream? How do you love freely when the people you love can be turned into a commodity, a line item on a ledger, and vanish from your life in an instant? The pain of this was something Harriet never forgot. It was this deep, personal wound that would later fuel her ferocious determination to lead others to freedom, to reunite families that the system had torn asunder. But even in this desolate world, seeds of hope and strength were being planted. Within the enslaved community, a powerful counterculture was thriving, hidden from the eyes of the enslavers. It was a culture built on shared experience, mutual support, and profound faith. Harriet's parents, Harriet Ritt Green and Ben Ross, were central to this. They were respected members of their community, and they instilled in their children a powerful sense of identity and worth that the system of slavery tried so hard to deny. Her father, Ben, was a skilled timberman who had a deep knowledge of the local woods and waterways, knowledge that would prove invaluable to Harriet in her later years. Faith was the bedrock of this community. Enslaved people found a powerful message of liberation in the stories of the Bible, particularly the story of Moses leading the Israelites out of bondage in Egypt. This wasn't just an abstract tale. It was a living promise. They held secret church meetings, often deep in the woods, which they called the invisible church. Here they could worship freely, singing spirituals that were more than just hymns. These songs were coded messages of hope, sorrow, and resistance. They were maps to freedom, expressions of a longing for a better world, and a testament to their unbroken spirit. Harriet was immersed in this spiritual world from a young age. Her mother, Rich, was a devout woman who taught her children prayers and Bible stories. Harriet absorbed these lessons, and they formed the core of her being. Her faith was not passive. It was active, personal, and visionary. She would later speak of having powerful visions and conversations with God, which she believed were divine guidance. This unshakable faith became her compass, her shield, and her source of supernatural courage. When faced with impossible odds, it was this belief in a higher power, a God of liberation, that gave her the strength to move mountains. The community itself was a form of resistance. In a world designed to isolate and dehumanize them, enslaved people forged powerful bonds. They shared food, cared for each other's children, and passed down stories and traditions. They created a network of kinship that extended beyond blood relatives, referring to each other as brother and sister. This sense of collective identity was a quiet rebellion. It was a declaration that said, "You may own our bodies, but you will never own our spirits. You can try to break us apart, but we will always find our way back to each other. We are not property. We are a people." This was the complex, brutal, and yet surprisingly resilient world that shaped Harriet Tubman. It was a world of backbreaking labor, but also of secret knowledge of the land. It was a world of unimaginable sorrow and loss, but also of deep family love and communal bonds. It was a world of systemic oppression, but also of a blazing revolutionary faith. Every lash of the whip, every family separation, every secret prayer sung in the woods, all of it forged the woman she was to become. The child who was born into the darkness of slavery in Dorchester County was quietly gathering the tools, the knowledge, the faith, and the righteous anger she would need to one day emerge as a light conductor, a warrior who would lead her people out of bondage and into the promised land of freedom. The world tried to crush her, but instead it created a force of nature. Thank you so much for joining us for this first chapter. It's a heavy topic, but it's crucial to understanding the hero's journey that follows. Please make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss Chapter 2, where we'll explore a life-altering injury and Harriet's first steps towards her own freedom. We appreciate you being here. See you next time. Imagine being just a little girl, not much older than 5, and already knowing the world as a place of harshness and fear. This was the reality for Araminta Ross, the girl we would come to know as the great Harriet Tubman. Back then she was called Minty, and her childhood was anything but sweet. Born into slavery in Maryland, Minty's earliest memories were not of a mother's lullaby or a father's gentle hand, but of neglect and the constant threat of violence. Her owners hired her out to other families, sending her away from her own kin to serve strangers. One of her first tasks was to care for a baby, a job that came with a terrible price. Every time the baby cried, Minty was whipped. She recalled being lashed 5 times before breakfast some days. She was just a child herself, exhausted and terrified, forced to stay awake all night, rocking a cradle. The physical scars were painful, but the emotional ones ran even deeper. This was just the beginning of the brutal reality of her enslavement, a foundation of hardship that would forge one of history's most unbreakable spirits. From a very young age, Minty was forced to witness one of the cruelest aspects of slavery, the separation of families. Imagine the heart-wrenching screams of a mother as her child is sold and taken away, never to be seen again. Imagine the silent, helpless grief of a father watching his family being dismantled piece by piece. For Minty, this wasn't just something she heard about. It was a scene that played out right before her young eyes. She saw her own sisters being sold to distant plantations, disappearing from her life forever. The raw pain and terror of those moments were seared into her memory. She felt the powerlessness, the injustice, and the profound sorrow that hung over the slave quarters like a permanent, heavy fog. These experiences weren't just traumatic. They were formative. They planted a seed of fierce resistance in her heart. She understood, in a way no book could ever teach, the true evil of a system that treated human beings like property and ripped families apart for profit. This personal painful knowledge of loss would become a powerful fuel for her later mission to guide others to freedom, to reunite families, and to fight against the very system that had caused her and so many others unimaginable pain. The physical brutality of Minty's life was relentless. The work was backbreaking, from checking muskrat traps in icy marshes to toiling in the fields under a blistering sun. The punishments were swift and severe. But one incident in her early teens would alter the course of her life forever. It happened at a local dry goods store. An enslaved man had left the fields without permission, and his overseer was in hot pursuit. The overseer ordered Minty to help him tie the man up. She refused. As the man made a run for it, the enraged overseer grabbed a 2-pound metal weight from the counter and hurled it at him. But he missed. Instead, the heavy weight struck Minty squarely in the head. The blow was catastrophic. She collapsed, bleeding and unconscious. For days, she hovered between life and death, receiving no medical care. Her own mother nursed her, praying for her survival. Miraculously, Minty did survive, but she was never the same. The injury left her with a lifetime of debilitating health problems. She would suffer from severe headaches, seizures, and sudden, uncontrollable sleeping spells, a condition now believed to be narcolepsy. This traumatic brain injury could have easily broken her, but for Minty, it became something more. In the aftermath of her severe head injury, something profound and mystical began to happen to Minty. During her seizures or sudden sleeping spells, she would experience powerful visions and vivid dreams. She described them as divine communications, messages directly from God. In these moments, she would see flashes of the future, receive warnings, or be shown paths to take. To her, these weren't just random dreams. They were a spiritual roadmap. She believed God had saved her for a reason and was now guiding her every step. These visions gave her a sense of purpose, a destiny that transcended the brutal reality of her enslavement. While others might have seen her condition as a weakness or a disability, Minty viewed it as a source of strength, a sacred connection to a higher power. This unshakable faith became her armor. It fortified her spirit and transformed her from a victim of circumstance into an agent of divine will. Her dreams and visions weren't just shaping her own sense of self. They were beginning to lay the groundwork for the incredible journey that lay ahead, shaping the woman who would become Moses to her people. So, let's step back and look at the young woman emerging from this crucible of suffering. We have Araminta Ross, a girl who had endured more pain and loss by her teens than most people experience in a lifetime. She had been neglected, abused, and had witnessed the soul-crushing horror of families being torn apart. She carried the physical and neurological scars of a near-fatal head injury, an injury that brought with it both debilitating seizures and what she believed to be divine visions. Every element of her early life seemed designed to crush her spirit, to make her compliant, to break her will. But instead, the opposite happened. Each lash, each loss, each moment of pain only forged her resolve, making it stronger, harder, and more resilient. Her experiences didn't fill her with despair. They filled her with a righteous fire. Her faith, deepened by her visions, gave her a sense of invincibility and a clear, unwavering purpose. The child named Minty was being molded by hardship, not into a victim, but into a warrior. The foundations were being laid for the legend we know as Harriet Tubman, a woman who would turn her personal pain into a powerful weapon for liberation. Think about the incredible transformation taking place. A young enslaved girl, subjected to the worst cruelties imaginable, begins to develop an unshakable sense of destiny. This wasn't born from comfort or privilege, but from the very depths of suffering. The pain of seeing her sister sold, the constant threat of the whip, the life-altering head injury, all of these things could have led to a life of quiet desperation. But for Harriet, they became the catalysts for her mission. Her visions, which many today might try to explain away medically, were, for her, undeniable proof that she was chosen for something greater. She wasn't just going to survive. She was going to fight back. She wasn't just going to endure. She was going to lead. This period of her life, filled with so much darkness, was actually the dawn of her awakening. It was where she learned the geography of oppression and the language of defiance. It was where her personal faith became a revolutionary force. The world saw a broken slave girl. God, she believed, was preparing a general for his army. And the battles she was about to wage would change the course of American history. As we close this chapter on Harriet's early life, It's crucial to understand that her strength wasn't something she was simply born with. It was forged in the fires of adversity. Her childhood was a relentless education in the mechanics of injustice. She learned firsthand what it meant to have your humanity denied, your family destroyed, and your body treated as someone else's property. But she also learned about the resilience of the human spirit. She learned about the power of faith to sustain you through the darkest of times. And through her visions, she began to believe in a future that no one else around her could see, a future of freedom. The girl known as Minty, who survived whippings, separations, and a brutal head wound, was unknowingly preparing for her life's work. She was gathering the strength, the courage, and the divine conviction she would need to become the most famous conductor on the Underground Railroad. Her past was not just a story of suffering. It was the origin story of a hero. It was the prelude to one of the most extraordinary tales of courage and liberation in human history. Thank you so much for joining me on this part of Harriet's incredible journey. If you found this story as moving and inspiring as I do, please hit that like button and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter, where Harriet's fight for freedom truly begins. We'll see you next time. It was a moment that split my life into a before and an after. As a young teenager, I couldn't stand by and watch cruelty unfold. An overseer, in a fit of rage, threw a heavy metal weight not at me, but at another soul trying to escape. I did what my conscience demanded. I stepped in. The weight wasn't meant for me, but it found me all the same. The blow to my head was crushing, a sound like the world cracking open, followed by a profound, ringing silence. I collapsed, bleeding, my world spiraling into darkness. Those who saw it happen thought I was gone. For days, I teetered on the edge, drifting in and out of consciousness, hovering in a space between life and what lies beyond. My mother, with her unwavering love, nursed me, never leaving my side, praying over my broken body. Miraculously, I survived. But I was not the same. The boy who stood up to that overseer was left behind on that dusty ground. A new person, someone forged in that crucible of pain, slowly began to emerge. The immediate aftermath was a constant, throbbing agony. Headaches, relentless and blinding, became my new companions. They would seize me without warning, a sharp, piercing pain that would drop me to my knees. But alongside this physical torment, something else began to happen, something strange and powerful. The world behind my eyes started to open up. I began to have visions, vivid dreams that felt more real than my waking hours. They weren't just fleeting images. They were immersive experiences, spiritual journeys that carried me far away. In these states, I saw things I couldn't explain. I would see fields ripe for harvest where there was only barren land. I saw people walking in chains suddenly breaking free, their faces illuminated by a light I could almost feel on my own skin. I saw celestial battles, heard choirs singing hymns of liberation, and felt a divine presence wrapping around me, comforting me, whispering that this suffering had a purpose. At first, it was frightening. I didn't understand what was happening to me. Some people dismissed it as the lingering effects of the injury, the ravings of a damaged mind. They called it fits, spells, a weakness. But in my heart I knew it was something more. These visions, which often came upon me suddenly and publicly, made me an object of curiosity and sometimes ridicule. The pain would hit, my senses would blur, and I would fall into one of these sacred trances, losing all awareness of my surroundings. To others, it looked like a seizure, a sudden collapse. I would be limp, seemingly lifeless, yet my mind was soaring. Inside these visions, I was being shown the future, being given messages of hope and deliverance. I saw a great river and, on the other side, a promised land. I saw lines of people, my people, marching under a star, not to bondage, but towards a new dawn. These weren't just dreams, they were blueprints. They were divine revelations, instructions whispered directly from God into my soul. The headaches were the price. The visions were the gift. The injury had cracked open not just my skull, but a channel to the spiritual realm. It was a heavy burden for a young man to carry. The physical weakness, the unpredictable nature of these episodes made me different, set me apart. But instead of breaking me, it began to build a new kind of strength within me, a resilience I never knew I possessed. This profound and often painful connection to the divine reshaped my entire being. My faith, which had always been a quiet comfort, now became a roaring fire. In the depths of my suffering, I found an unshakable resolve. The visions weren't random. They were a conversation. They assured me that I was not forgotten, that our struggle was seen by a higher power. Each headache was a reminder of my own fragility, but each vision was a confirmation of a strength far greater than my own. This duality became the core of my existence. I learned to pray not for the pain to end, but for the strength to endure it and the wisdom to understand its meaning. I started to see the blow not as a curse, but as a calling. It was an anointing, a brutal but holy consecration that set me on a path I could never have imagined. The world saw a damaged epileptic field hand. But in my visions, I was shown that I was a vessel, a messenger. The struggle wasn't just mine. It was the struggle of my people, and these visions were a promise that deliverance would come. My resolve deepened, hardening from a simple wish for freedom into an ironclad conviction that I had a role to play in bringing that freedom to pass. The pain was my teacher, the visions my guide. This period of my life was a spiritual forge. Every day was a test of faith and endurance. I had to learn to live in two worlds at once: the harsh, unforgiving world of slavery and the luminous, prophetic world of my visions. I learned to interpret the symbols, to listen to the silent language of the Spirit. The visions gave me a sense of purpose that transcended my physical reality. While my body was in bondage, my spirit was flying free, communing with God, and receiving glimpses of a future where that freedom would be made real for everyone. This inner life became my sanctuary, my source of unyielding hope. It steeled me against the daily degradation and despair. When the overseer's whip cracked, I could hear the echo of celestial choirs. When I toiled under the blazing sun, I could feel the cool hand of grace on my brow. My struggle was no longer just about survival, it was about preparation. I was being molded, tested, and taught. The pain and the prophecies were intertwined, two sides of the same divine coin. My faith was no longer something I just believed. It was something I lived, breathed, and experienced in the most visceral, powerful way imaginable. This journey inward was building the foundation for the journey outward that was yet to come. I was being prepared for a mission, and I knew, with a certainty that burned brighter than any pain, that my life had a meaning far beyond the confines of the plantation. The boy who was struck down was gone, and in his place stood a young man who had walked in the valley of the shadow of death and emerged with a fire in his eyes. The injury that was meant to break me had instead become the source of my greatest strength. It gave me a direct line to the divine, a compass that would guide my steps for the rest of my life. My resolve was no longer just a personal desire. It was a sacred duty. I understood that my suffering was not meaningless. It was a baptism by fire, preparing me for the path ahead. The headaches were a constant cross to bear, but the visions were a crown of prophecy, a promise of what was to come. I was being called to a purpose greater than myself, and every ounce of pain was forging me into the instrument I needed to be to answer that call. Years later, a new name and a first step toward freedom. Thank you for joining me on this part of the journey. If this story resonates with you, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel to follow the path as it unfolds. Your support means the world. The air grew heavy, thick with a tension you could almost taste. For Harriet, every day under the thumb of oppression felt like a year. The whip was a constant threat, the labor was backbreaking, but it was the slow grinding erosion of her spirit that was the cruelest torture. The simple human dignity of choosing your own path, of owning your own body and soul, was a dream she held on to, a tiny flame flickering in the darkest of nights. She looked at her hands, calloused and worn, and knew they were meant for more than just serving another's will. They were meant to build a life, a free life. The longing for liberty wasn't just a fleeting thought. It became the very beat of her heart, a constant, urgent rhythm. It was a hunger that no amount of food could satisfy, a thirst that no water could quench. She would watch the birds fly north, their wings catching the wind, and a fierce, painful envy would twist in her gut. They were free. Why wasn't she? This question echoed in her mind, day and night. She saw the despair in the eyes of her family and friends, the resignation that settled over them like a shroud. But in Harriet, that despair was hardening into a diamond-sharp resolve. She refused to let her spirit be broken. The dream of freedom was no longer a gentle whisper. It was a roaring fire. Then the whispers started. They slithered through the fields and cabins like poisonous snakes, words that struck terror into the heart of every enslaved person. Down south, being sold. Down the river, to the brutal cotton and sugar plantations of the Deep South, was a fate worse than death. It meant being torn from family, from the only home you've ever known, and thrown into an abyss of unimaginable cruelty and labor from which almost no one returned. The rumors clung to Harriet, a cold dread that seeped into her bones. She saw the auction block in her nightmares, felt the phantom touch of a buyer's hands inspecting her like livestock. The possibility of being sold south wasn't just a threat. It was a death sentence for her soul. The fear was paralyzing, but for Harriet, it was also clarifying. It was the final push, the breaking point. The thought of her family being scattered to the winds, of her own life being extinguished under the scorching southern sun, was unbearable. It was in that crucible of terror and desperation that a decision was forged. She would not wait for her fate to be decided by others. She would not be sold. She would not be broken. She would be free, or she would die trying. The choice was stark, terrifying, and utterly absolute. There was no turning back now. The path ahead was unknown, fraught with danger at every turn, but it was her path to choose. She looked at the familiar fields, the woods she knew like the back of her hand, and saw them not as a prison, but as a potential pathway to freedom. She would use the knowledge forced upon her by her oppressors against them. She would navigate by the North Star, the same star that had guided countless others on their desperate journeys. The risk was monumental. Capture meant certain, brutal punishment, a public and painful example made of her to deter others. But what was that compared to the slow death of a life in chains? Harriet chose to risk everything for a chance at a life she could call her own. She chose hope over despair, action over submission. With a prayer on her lips and her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs, Harriet made her move. Under the cloak of darkness, she slipped away, melting into the shadows of the Maryland night. Each snapping twig, each hoot of an owl, sounded like a thunderclap, threatening to expose her. Her feet, guided by a fierce and unyielding will, carried her north. This was not just an escape. It was a declaration of war against the institution that had tried to crush her. It was the first step on a journey that would define her life and change the course of history. This single act of defiance was the genesis of a legend. Harriet wasn't just running for her own freedom. She was running towards her destiny. That harrowing journey through swamps and forests, hiding in plain sight, trusting in the secret network of the Underground Railroad, transformed her. The fear was still there, a constant companion, but it was now overshadowed by a powerful sense of purpose. She learned to read the woods, to trust her instincts, to rely on the kindness of strangers who risked their own lives to help. Each mile she traveled was a victory, a testament to the strength of the human spirit. When she finally crossed the line into the free state of Pennsylvania, the feeling was overwhelming. She would later say, "I looked at my hands to see if I was the same person. There was such a glory over everything. The sun came like gold through the trees and over the fields, and I felt like I was in heaven." But her personal freedom was not enough. As she stood there, a free woman, her thoughts immediately turned to those she had left behind. Her family, her friends, her people, they were still in bondage. And so, her daring escape was not an end, but a beginning. It was the start of a lifelong mission. Harriet Tubman would not be content with her own liberty while others suffered. She had found the path to freedom, and now she would become the guide. She would return again and again into the lion's den, risking her own life to lead others out of the darkness. Her own breaking point had forged her into a weapon for justice, a conductor on the Underground Railroad who would come to be known as Moses to her people. Her journey had just begun. Thank you so much for joining me on this chapter of Harriet Tubman's incredible story. Her courage is a powerful reminder that one person's decision can truly change the world. If you found this story as moving as I did, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more chapters from the lives of history's most inspiring figures. We'd love to have you as part of our community. See you next time. Imagine for a moment, the year is 1849. The air in Maryland is thick with tension. A place where freedom is a distant dream for so many. For one woman, Harriet, that dream was about to become a desperate moonlit reality. This is the story of her first escape, a journey that would not only change her life but redefine the meaning of courage for generations to come. Harriet knew the risks were monumental. Capture meant a fate far worse than the life she was leaving behind. But the pull of freedom was stronger than any fear. She made her decision not with a grand announcement but with a quiet, resolute heart. The time had come, she would leave. She would be free, or she would die trying. Her journey began under the cloak of darkness. Night was her ally, the shadows her sanctuary. While the world slept, Harriet moved. She traveled alone, a solitary figure against the vast, unforgiving landscape. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig, could signal discovery. Her senses were on high alert, her body fueled by a potent mix of adrenaline and hope. This wasn't just a physical journey. It was a battle of wits, a test of endurance against an entire system designed to keep her captive. How do you navigate 100 miles of hostile territory with no map, no compass, no modern technology? Harriet looked to the heavens. Her guide was a constant shimmering point of light in the vast, inky sky, the North Star. This celestial beacon, a symbol of freedom for countless enslaved people, became her unwavering director. She learned its position, trusted its guidance, and followed it relentlessly northward. The stars weren't just distant fires. They were a roadmap to a new life, a promise whispered from the cosmos. But the sky wasn't her only teacher. Harriet became a master of the natural world. She learned to read the landscape like a book. The way moss grew thicker on the north side of trees, the flow of rivers and streams, the calls of nocturnal animals all became clues, whispers from nature guiding her path. She learned to forage for food, finding sustenance in wild berries and roots, turning the very wilderness that threatened her into a source of survival. She moved with the rhythm of the earth, becoming one with the forests and fields she traversed. Yet she wasn't entirely alone. Along her perilous route, Harriet encountered a secret network of brave souls, a clandestine chain of hope known as the Underground Railroad. These weren't actual trains or tracks, but a series of safe houses, hidden rooms, secret cellars, and quiet barns operated by courageous men and women, both black and white. These conductors risked their own lives and freedom to offer a meal, a safe place to rest, or a crucial piece of information to freedom seekers like Harriet. Finding these safe havens was a dangerous dance of trust and intuition. A quilt hanging on a clothesline with a specific pattern, a lantern lit in a window, these were the subtle signals. For Harriet, each knock on a stranger's door was a leap of faith. Would she be met with a helping hand or a betrayal? Time and again, she found goodness in the hearts of these conductors. They were the human stars that lit her path when the night was at its darkest, quiet heroes who formed the lifeblood of this legendary railroad. Imagine the sheer exhaustion, the constant fear gnawing at her. Days were spent in hiding, often in cramped, damp spaces, holding her breath at every passing sound. Nights were for walking, pushing her body to its absolute limit, her feet blistered and her muscles aching. The physical toll was immense, but the mental and emotional strain was even greater. The loneliness, the uncertainty, the ever-present threat of the slave catchers and their dogs, it was a psychological war. But Harriet's resolve was forged in fire. It would not break. Finally, after weeks of relentless travel, she crossed a line. It wasn't a line marked on any map, but it was the most significant border she would ever cross. She had reached Pennsylvania, a free state. For the first time in her life, she stood on soil where she was not considered someone's property. She described the moment herself, saying, "When I found I had crossed that line, I looked at my hands to see if I was the same person. There was such a glory over everything. The sun came like gold through the trees and over the fields, and I felt like I was in heaven. The feeling was pure, overwhelming euphoria. The air itself felt different. She was free. The chains, both physical and invisible, had fallen away. She had done the impossible. She had escaped." In that moment of glorious freedom, Harriet could have simply started her new life. She could have found work, settled down, and enjoyed the liberty she had so bravely won for herself. No one would have blamed her. She had earned it. But as the initial joy settled, a profound realization began to dawn on her. She was free, but her family, her husband, her parents, her siblings were not. Her friends and the community she had left behind were still in bondage. Her freedom felt incomplete, almost hollow, while those she loved remained enslaved. She looked back toward the south, and her heart ached with a new, powerful purpose. Her journey wasn't over. In fact, it had just begun. This first escape was more than just a flight to personal freedom. It was a transformation. It was the crucible that forged Harriet the survivor into Harriet the Savior. She had not only learned the treacherous route to the north, but she had also discovered the depth of her own strength, her own resilience, and her own unshakable courage. She realized her mission was not just about saving herself. It was about returning, again and again, into the lion's den to lead others to the freedom she now knew. Her personal journey of escape was about to become a legendary crusade. She would become a conductor herself, the most famous conductor on the Underground Railroad, a woman who would be known by another name, Moses. Thank you so much for joining us on this incredible part of Harriet's story. Her journey is a powerful reminder of what one person can achieve with courage and conviction. If you found this story as moving as we did, please give this video a thumbs up and consider subscribing to our channel for more chapters from history. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you won't miss our next episode. We'll see you then. Hello and welcome back to our journey through the incredible life of Harriet Tubman. In our last chapter, we left Harriet as she crossed that invisible line into freedom, a moment of pure, breathtaking triumph. But what happens after that first taste of liberty? That's what we're exploring today in Chapter 6. Freedom, but not enough. Imagine the feeling. After years of bondage, Harriet was finally in Pennsylvania, a free woman. The sun must have felt different on her skin, the air fresher in her lungs. She later said, "When I found I had crossed that line, I looked at my hands to see if I was the same person. There was such a glory over everything. The sun came like gold through the trees and over the fields, and I felt like I was in heaven. It's a powerful image, isn't it? A moment of pure, unadulterated joy." For the first time, she was the master of her own destiny. No one owned her. No one could sell her. She was free. But this overwhelming joy was almost immediately tinged with a deep, aching sorrow. As she stood there, alone in a new land, her thoughts raced back to the life she had left behind. Her parents, her siblings, her husband, John, they were all still enslaved in Maryland. Her freedom felt incomplete, almost selfish, when the people she loved most in the world were still in chains. How could she truly be in heaven when her family remained in hell? This profound sense of loneliness and responsibility began to weigh heavily on her heart. The glory of her own freedom was shadowed by the darkness of their bondage. Harriet made her way to Philadelphia, a bustling city that was a major center for the nation's free black population. This was a world unlike anything she had ever known. Here, she saw black people who owned their own businesses, who walked the streets with confidence, who had established their own churches, schools, and vibrant communities. For someone who had only known the oppressive system of slavery, this was a revelation. It was proof that a different life was possible. In Philadelphia, Harriet found work as a cook and a domestic servant. She was determined to be self-sufficient, to make her own way in this new world. She was a hard worker, and she carefully saved every penny she earned. But she wasn't just working to survive. She was working with a purpose. Every dollar saved was a step closer to a goal that was beginning to form in her mind. A goal born from that mix of joy and sorrow she felt on her first day of freedom. The city was also a hotbed of abolitionist activity. Harriet began attending meetings of the Philadelphia Vigilance Committee, an organization led by figures like William Still. Still, a free-born black man, was a pivotal leader in the Underground Railroad, and he meticulously documented the stories of the escaped slaves who passed through Philadelphia. At these meetings, Harriet listened intently. She heard harrowing tales of escape, stories of families torn apart, and accounts of the brutal realities still facing millions in the South. These stories resonated deeply with her own experience. She wasn't just an observer, she was one of them. She understood their pain, their fear, and their burning desire for freedom. Hearing their testimonies alongside the passionate speeches of abolitionists fanned the flames of her own resolve. It wasn't just about her family anymore. It was about everyone who suffered under the whip. She saw the vast network of brave men and women, both black and white, who were risking everything to help others find freedom. And she knew with a certainty that settled deep in her soul that she had to be a part of it. Her time in Philadelphia was transformative. It was an education, a period of awakening. She learned about the secret routes, the safe houses, and the conductors of the Underground Railroad. She learned how to navigate the treacherous path from south to north. The knowledge she gained was practical, but the inspiration she felt was spiritual. She realized that her own escape was not the end of her story. It was just the beginning. It was a training ground for a much greater mission. The comfort and relative safety of Philadelphia could have been enough. She had earned her freedom. She could have settled down, built a new life for herself, and tried to forget the horrors of the past. Many people would have, and no one would have blamed them. But Harriet Tubman was not like most people. The thought of her loved one's suffering was a constant, gnawing presence. Her personal freedom felt like a hollow victory as long as they were not free with her. And so, a decision crystallized in her mind, a decision that would change the course of her life and the lives of hundreds of others. It was a choice so dangerous, so audacious that it defied all logic. She decided she would go back. Back into the lion's den. Back to the slave-holding South, where a captured runaway faced torture or death. Back to the very place she had risked everything to escape. Her purpose was clear. She would become a conductor on the Underground Railroad. She would use her knowledge, her courage, and her faith to guide her family and others to the freedom she now knew. The woman who had been called Minty, who had suffered a debilitating head injury, who had escaped slavery alone and on foot, was now preparing to become a rescuer, a liberator. The fear was immense, but her love for her family and her commitment to justice were stronger. Her own journey to freedom had prepared her for this. It was no longer just about her own survival, it was about theirs. This decision marks a pivotal turning point in Harriet's story, transforming her from a fugitive into a freedom fighter. It's a testament to her extraordinary courage and her profound empathy. Join us next time as we follow Harriet on her first perilous return to the South, where she will begin her legendary career as the Moses of her people. Thank you so much for watching and for being a part of this community. If you're finding value in this series, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing to the channel so you don't miss the next chapter in this incredible story. We'll see you next time. Have you ever heard of a railroad that had no tracks and no trains? A railroad that operated in the dead of night, shrouded in secrecy, with its passengers risking everything for a single destination: freedom. This wasn't a railroad of steel and steam, but one of courage, resilience, and an unbreakable human spirit. This was the Underground Railroad. Welcome back to our journey through history. Today, we're delving into Chapter 7, exploring one of the most remarkable and daring chapters in the fight against slavery: the network of the Underground Railroad. It's a story that sounds like it's straight out of a spy novel, but for thousands of enslaved people, this was their real-life path to liberation. So what exactly was the Underground Railroad? Let's clear up a common misconception right away. It wasn't a literal physical railroad buried underground. The name was a metaphor. Underground referred to its secretive, illegal nature, while railroad was used because it adopted the language of the railway system to describe its operations. People who guided the escapees were called conductors. The safe houses where they could rest and hide were known as stations or depots. The individuals seeking freedom were passengers or cargo. This coded language was essential for maintaining secrecy and protecting everyone involved from the ever-present danger of capture. Imagine this: you've just escaped from a plantation, with nothing but the clothes on your back and a burning desire for freedom in your heart. You're traveling under the cover of darkness, guided only by the North Star, which was often called the drinking gourd. Every rustle of leaves, every dog's bark could mean recapture, which often led to brutal punishment or worse. The journey was fraught with peril. Slave catchers with their hounds and weapons were a constant threat, and the natural elements, freezing rivers, dense forests, and harsh weather, were relentless. This is where the network came in. The Underground Railroad wasn't a single, organized entity with a central command. Instead, it was a loose, decentralized web of brave individuals who believed in the abolitionist cause. These were ordinary people doing extraordinary things. The network relied on a chain of safe houses, often spaced about 10 to 20 miles apart, which was roughly the distance someone could travel on foot in a single night. These safe houses were the lifeblood of the railroad. They could be the cellar of a farmhouse, a secret room in a city home, a hidden compartment in a barn, or even a church. The owners of these homes, the station masters, were taking enormous risks. Harboring fugitive slaves was a federal crime under the Fugitive Slave Acts of 1793 and, more severely, 1850. If caught, they could face hefty fines, imprisonment, and social ruin. Yet, they did it anyway, driven by their moral convictions. Communication was key, and it had to be done in code. A quilt hanging on a clothesline with a specific pattern might signal that a house was safe. A lantern lit in a certain window could mean the coast was clear. Songs were also powerful tools. Spirituals like "Follow the Drinking Gourd" or "Wade in the Water" weren't just songs of faith. They contained hidden instructions. Wade in the water, for instance, advised escaping slaves to travel in rivers and streams to throw pursuing bloodhounds off their scent. It was ingenious, a testament to the creativity born from desperation and hope. One of the most beautiful and powerful aspects of the Underground Railroad was the collaboration between black and white abolitionists. This was a truly interracial movement. Free African Americans were the backbone of the network. Many were former slaves themselves, and they understood the risks like no one else. They served as conductors, opened their homes and churches as safe havens, and raised funds to support the cause. Figures like William Still in Philadelphia are legendary. Known as the father of the Underground Railroad, he meticulously documented the stories of the nearly 800 freedom seekers he helped, creating an invaluable historical record. And then of course there's the iconic Harriet Tubman. Born into slavery, she escaped to freedom but returned to the South an estimated 13 times to guide more than 70 enslaved people, including her own family, to the North. She was never caught and never lost a single passenger. Her courage was boundless. She used disguises, carried a weapon for protection, and navigated treacherous terrain with uncanny skill. She became a symbol of hope, known as Moses to her people for leading them to the promised land of freedom. Alongside these black heroes were countless white abolitionists, many of whom were Quakers or members of other religious groups who believed slavery was a profound moral sin. They used their resources, their homes, and their social standing to aid the cause. Levi Coffin, a Quaker from Indiana, was so active that he was sometimes called the president of the Underground Railroad. It's estimated that he and his wife, Catherine, personally helped over 2,000 people escape. This alliance was revolutionary. In a society deeply divided by race, the Underground Railroad was a space where black and white individuals worked together as equals, united by a common goal. They trusted each other with their lives, forming bonds of solidarity that defied the racist norms of the era. But we must never forget the immense dangers. The journey was a life-or-death gamble. For the escaping slaves, capture meant being returned to a furious master and facing horrific brutality. For the conductors and station masters, the risks were also severe. Their homes could be burned, they could be attacked, and they faced legal prosecution. The story of Seth Conklin, a white abolitionist who tried to help a family escape, is a tragic reminder. He was captured, and his body was later found in a river, a victim of pro-slavery violence. Despite these terrifying risks, the network persevered. It's difficult to know the exact number, but historians estimate that as many as 100,000 people escaped slavery via the Underground Railroad between 1810 and 1860. Each one of those numbers represents a human being who chose to risk death for a chance at life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The Underground Railroad wasn't just a means of escape. It was an act of mass civil disobedience. It was a direct challenge to the institution of slavery and the laws that protected it. It demonstrated that the human desire for freedom is a force that cannot be extinguished. The network showed the power of collective action, proving that even in the darkest of times, compassion, courage, and solidarity can light the way forward. It's a crucial reminder that history is not just made by presidents and generals, but by everyday people who dare to do what is right, no matter the cost. The legacy of the Underground Railroad lives on. It is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and a powerful story of hope against overwhelming odds. It reminds us of the long and arduous struggle for freedom and equality, a struggle that continues in different forms even today. Thank you for joining me for this chapter. The story of the Underground Railroad is one of the most inspiring in American history, and it's an honor to share it with you. If you found this video insightful, please give it a thumbs up. And don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next chapter. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, stay curious. Hello and welcome back to our journey through the incredible life of Harriet Tubman. Today, we delve into Chapter 8, a pivotal moment where Harriet transforms from a fugitive seeking her own freedom into a legendary conductor on the Underground Railroad, earning a name that would echo through history, Moses. After her own daring escape to Philadelphia, Harriet could have settled into a life of relative safety. She had her freedom, a job, and a new community. But freedom wasn't truly sweet while her family and friends remained in bondage. The thought of their suffering was a constant ache in her heart. She later said, "I was a stranger in a strange land." My father, my mother, my brothers and sisters and friends were in Maryland. But I was free, and they should be free. This conviction ignited a fire within her. Harriet made a decision that defied all logic and safety. She would go back. Not just once, but again and again. Her first rescue missions were deeply personal. In December 1850, she received word that her niece, Keziah, and her 2 young children were about to be sold and separated. The risk was immense. The Fugitive Slave Act had just been passed, making it even more dangerous for anyone assisting runaways, and for Harriet herself to be in slave territory. But Harriet didn't hesitate. With incredible cunning and bravery, she orchestrated a complex escape plan. Keziah's husband, a free black man named John Bowley, won the auction for his own family, but it was a ruse. Under the cover of darkness, he spirited them away to a prearranged meeting point. There, in the shadows, was Harriet, ready to guide them on the perilous journey north. Imagine the fear, the biting cold, the constant threat of discovery. Yet Harriet guided them through swamps and dense woods, her knowledge of the land her greatest weapon. They traveled by night, hiding in haystacks, potato holes, and the secret rooms of brave abolitionists, both black and white, who formed the network of the Underground Railroad. Her success with Keziah's family was just the beginning. The following year, she returned for one of her brothers, and then again for others. Each trip was a dance with death. She had to be a master of disguise, a brilliant strategist, and a source of unwavering strength for the terrified people she led. She carried a sedative to quiet crying babies and, some accounts say, a firearm not to harm others, but to instill courage and prevent anyone from turning back out of fear, which would endanger the entire group. Harriet's methods were meticulous. She often started her journeys on a Saturday night, knowing that runaway notices wouldn't be published in newspapers until Monday morning, giving them a crucial head start. She used spirituals as coded signals. Songs like Go Down Moses or Wade in the Water were not just hymns of faith. They were secret messages, telling enslaved people when it was safe to meet or how to throw slave catchers and their bloodhounds off their trail. As she led group after group out of the darkness of slavery into the light of freedom, her legend began to grow. To the slaveholders, she was a mysterious and infuriating thief, a ghost they could never catch. They placed a massive bounty on her head, but they never even knew she was a woman. They were hunting a phantom. But to the enslaved people in the fields and cabins of Maryland's eastern shore, she became a symbol of hope, a deliverer. They whispered her name in secret, sharing stories of her impossible journeys. They didn't call her Harriet. They called her Moses, after the biblical prophet who led his people out of bondage in Egypt. This name was more than a nickname. It was a title of reverence. Like the Moses of the Old Testament, Harriet was parting the waters of oppression and leading her people to a promised land. She never lost a single passenger on her journeys. Think about that. Over the course of a decade, she made an estimated 13 trips and guided around 70 people, her family, friends, and even strangers to freedom. Her reputation as Moses spread like wildfire through the enslaved communities. Her very existence was an act of defiance, a powerful testament to the idea that freedom was possible. She was proof that one person, armed with courage, faith, and an unbreakable will, could challenge an entire system of injustice. She wasn't just rescuing individuals. She was chipping away at the very foundation of slavery, one soul at a time. The whispers of Moses is coming were whispers of liberation, a promise of a new dawn. Harriet's transformation into Moses wasn't just about her physical journeys. It was a spiritual and psychological evolution. She was guided by a deep faith and what she believed were premonitions from God, visions that warned her of danger or showed her safe paths. This spiritual conviction gave her a sense of purpose and fearlessness that was palpable to those she led. They trusted her completely because they could see that she was driven by something greater than herself. She was on a divine mission, and in the darkest nights and most terrifying moments, her faith was the lantern that lit the way for everyone. Join us next time as we explore the deepening dangers and expanding scope of Harriet's work as the nation hurtled towards civil war. Her role as Moses was just one chapter in a life of extraordinary courage. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this story as inspiring as I do, please give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next chapter. We'll see you then. Welcome back to our journey through history. Today, in Chapter 9, we're diving deep into the clandestine world of survival, exploring the ingenious and often harrowing methods people use to navigate treacherous landscapes in secret. Imagine a world where the line between freedom and peril is razor thin, where every shadow could hide a threat and every sound could be a betrayal. How did they do it? Let's uncover the methods of secrecy and survival that kept hope alive against all odds. The most fundamental rule was to become a creature of the night. The sun, usually a symbol of life and clarity, became a source of danger. So they reversed their lives, traveling by the dim light of the moon and stars, and resting during the day. This wasn't just about avoiding being seen. It meant contending with the cold, the unfamiliar sounds of the nocturnal world, and the constant strain of being alert when the body craved sleep. Daylight hours were spent in hidden locations, dense thickets, hidden cellars, or disguised barns. Sleep was often fitful, interrupted by the slightest noise, the mind never truly at rest. This reversal of the natural rhythm was a profound psychological and physical challenge, a constant reminder of their precarious existence. They had to learn to read the night sky, to use constellations as their map, and to feel their way through paths that were invisible to the untrained eye. Every sunrise was a deadline, a race to find shelter before the world awakened. But how do you communicate when silence is your greatest shield? You can't shout warnings or share information openly. This is where the sheer brilliance of coded communication comes into play. Songs, hymns, and spirituals became a secret language, their melodies carrying messages hidden in plain sight. A particular hymn sung in a certain way could signal that a path was clear, while another could warn of approaching danger. Lyrics that seemed to speak of spiritual journeys were actually detailed instructions. References to a river might mean a specific crossing point, and a call to wade in the water was a practical tip to throw trekking dogs off the scent. Think about the layers of courage this required. You're singing a song that sounds innocent to your enemies, but to your allies, it's a lifeline. This was a shared, secret vocabulary woven into the very fabric of their culture, a powerful tool that was both untraceable and deeply personal. It was a language of hope, sung softly in the dark. Now let's talk about protection. In a world fraught with danger, you might expect them to be heavily armed. But the reality was often the opposite. Carrying multiple weapons would not only be cumbersome, but would also attract suspicion if they were ever stopped and searched. The strategy was one of evasion, not confrontation. However, they weren't completely defenseless. Often, a single easily concealable pistol was carried. This wasn't for offensive attacks or shootouts. Its primary purpose was self-defense in the most dire of circumstances, a last resort. More than that, it was a psychological tool. The knowledge that they had a final line of defense could provide the courage needed to continue when fear threatened to overwhelm them. It was a grim necessity, a symbol of the life or death stakes they faced on their journey. The weight of that single weapon was a constant reminder of the fine line they walked between survival and capture. Finally, what happens when the path is unclear, when maps are useless, and when every choice feels like a gamble? This is where an unshakable trust in faith and instinct became the ultimate guide. When faced with an uncertain fork in the road or a suspicious-looking safe house, logic and reason could only take them so far. In these moments, they had to rely on something deeper. It was a gut feeling, a sudden sense of unease, or a powerful surge of conviction that a certain direction was the right one. For many, this was intertwined with their spiritual faith, a belief that a higher power was guiding their steps, protecting them from harm. They would pray for a sign, for clarity, and then act on the feeling that followed. This wasn't recklessness. It was a highly attuned sense of awareness, honed by constant danger. It was about trusting the subtle cues in their environment and in their own hearts when all other information failed. This reliance on instinct and faith was perhaps their most powerful tool, an internal compass that pointed toward freedom when all external maps were lost. These methods, traveling by night, using coded songs, carrying minimal protection, and trusting in faith, paint a picture of incredible resilience, ingenuity, and courage. It was a silent, secret war fought not with armies, but with whispers, songs, and an unbreakable spirit. These weren't just survival tactics. They were acts of defiance, a testament to the human will to be free. Thank you so much for joining me for this chapter. The stories of these survivors are a powerful part of our shared history. If you found this moving or informative, please give this video a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next chapter. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, stay curious. Hello everyone, and welcome back to our journey through the incredible life of Harriet Tubman. In our last chapter, we saw Harriet begin her legendary work, guiding her family members to freedom. But just as the Underground Railroad was gaining momentum, a dark shadow fell across the nation, one that would change the very nature of escape and push Harriet's courage to its absolute limits. Today, we're diving into Chapter 10, The Slave Catchers and the Fugitive Slave Act. Imagine the feeling of finally reaching the North. You've traveled hundreds of miles, faced down incredible dangers, and you can finally taste freedom. You've settled in a free state like Pennsylvania or New York, maybe found a job and started to build a new life. You believe you are safe. But then, in 1850, everything changed. The United States Congress passed a new, more aggressive Fugitive Slave Act, and it was a devastating blow to the abolitionist movement and to every person who had escaped bondage. What made this law so terrifying? Well, it essentially deputized the entire nation. It required citizens, even those in free states who were morally opposed to slavery, to assist in the capture of suspected fugitives. If you were accused of being an escaped slave, you had virtually no rights. You couldn't testify in your own defense. There was no trial by jury. A commissioner or judge would decide your fate, and the law was financially biased. The official would be paid $10 for every person sent back into slavery, but only $5 for setting someone free. It created a perverse incentive to enslave, not liberate. For Harriet and the people she helped, this was a game changer. The North was no longer a safe haven. The imaginary line between slave states and free states, the Mason-Dixon line, was effectively erased. The law unleashed a new wave of terror in the form of professional slave catchers. These were ruthless men who roamed the northern states, hunting for escaped slaves. They were often brutal and motivated by greed, as they were paid handsomely for every person they returned to a southern plantation. But it wasn't just recently escaped fugitives who were in danger. The law was so loosely written that it put all black people in the North at risk, including those who had been free for years, or even those who had been born free. A simple accusation, without any real proof, could be enough to have someone kidnapped and sent into slavery. Free black communities were gripped by fear. People who had built lives, families, and businesses over decades were suddenly forced to look over their shoulders, wondering if today was the day a slave catcher would come knocking. Many fled their homes, leaving everything behind to seek safety elsewhere. Harriet saw this new reality firsthand. The places that were once destinations of hope were now just dangerous stopovers. Philadelphia, a major hub for abolitionists and a city where Harriet had found her own freedom, was now teeming with slave catchers. The danger was palpable. Harriet knew she couldn't stop her work that wasn't in her nature, but she had to adapt. Her mission became infinitely more complex and dangerous. It was no longer enough to get people to the North. She had to get them out of the United States entirely. This is where Harriet's genius for strategy truly shines. She looked at the map and saw a new promised land, a place where American laws and slave catchers had no power: Canada. At the time, Canada was part of the British Empire, which had abolished slavery in 1834. Once a fugitive set foot on Canadian soil, they were legally free and protected. So Harriet rerouted the Underground Railroad. The journey became longer, colder, and even more arduous. Instead of ending in Pennsylvania or New York, her routes now extended hundreds of miles further north, often ending in St. Catharines, Ontario, a growing community of formerly enslaved people. Think about the added difficulty. Harriet was already operating with incredible risk, but now she had to navigate through territories where she was less familiar. During harsh northern winters with exhausted and frightened people who had already traveled an immense distance. Every river crossing, every night spent hiding in a barn, every meal begged or borrowed carried the weight of this new, expanded threat. The Fugitive Slave Act was meant to crush the spirit of escape, to make the journey seem impossible. But for Harriet Tubman, it was just another obstacle to overcome. It didn't stop her. It just made her stronger, smarter, and more determined. She learned the routes to Canada like the back of her hand. She established new contacts, new safe houses, and new codes. She understood that the stakes were now life or death, not just freedom or slavery. If caught, not only would the people she was guiding be returned to a fate worse than before, but she herself would face a punishment far more severe than any she had previously risked. The slaveholders were furious with her, and the Fugitive Slave Act put a massive bounty on her head. She was, in the eyes of the law, the most wanted woman in America. But Harriet was guided by her faith and her unwavering commitment to liberation. She famously said, "I was the conductor of the Underground Railroad for 8 years. And I can say what most conductors can't say. I never ran my train off the track, and I never lost a passenger." That incredible record is even more astounding when you consider that for most of her career as a conductor, she was operating under the constant threat of the Fugitive Slave Act. She outsmarted slave catchers, navigated treacherous terrain, and soothed the fears of her passengers, promising them a new life in a new land. The passage of the 1850 Fugitive Slave Act was a dark moment in American history, designed to reinforce the institution of slavery. But it had an unintended consequence. It forged one of history's greatest heroes. It pushed Harriet Tubman to extend her reach, refine her methods, and expand her legend. She transformed a desperate flight into a journey towards true, unassailable freedom under the Canadian flag. Her response to this oppressive law is a powerful testament to her resilience and strategic brilliance. And that's where we'll pause for today. Harriet's decision to reroute the railroad to Canada was a pivotal moment. And in our next chapter, we'll explore the community that was built there and the specific journeys she led into this new northern sanctuary. The stories are filled with even more danger, close calls, and breathtaking courage. Thank you so much for joining me for this part of Harriet's story. If you're finding this series meaningful, please hit that like button and be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next chapter. Your support helps us continue to share these vital histories. We'll see you next time. Hello everyone, and welcome back to our journey through the life of the incredible Harriet Tubman. Last time we followed her daring escapes and rescues. Today, in Chapter 11, we're exploring the vital network that made it all possible, the allies in the struggle. Harriet was a force of nature, but she didn't walk the path to freedom alone. She was part of a vast clandestine community, a web of brave souls united against the injustice of slavery. This network was the lifeblood of the Underground Railroad, and understanding it is key to understanding the sheer scale of their achievement. So, who were these allies? They were a diverse group of people from all walks of life, each risking everything for a cause they believed in. Central to this network were abolitionists who dedicated their lives to the fight. One of the most important figures was William Still, often called the father of the Underground Railroad. Based in Philadelphia, Still was a free black man, a brilliant organizer, and a meticulous record keeper. He was a critical station master, interviewing every freedom seeker who passed through his office. He carefully documented their stories, their family connections, and their harrowing journeys. Imagine arriving in a strange city after weeks on the run, terrified and exhausted. William Still's office was a sanctuary. He provided food, shelter, and medical care. But more than that, he provided validation. By recording their stories, he affirmed their humanity and preserved their history for posterity. For Harriet, Still was more than just a contact. He was a trusted partner. He provided her with funds and strategic information for her missions back into Maryland. Their correspondence shows a deep mutual respect. Still saw in Harriet a conductor of unparalleled skill and courage, and his records are one of the primary reasons we know so much about her incredible work today. Another key ally was Thomas Garrett, a Quaker from Wilmington, Delaware. Garrett was a successful businessman who used his wealth and influence to help the cause. His home was a major station on the Underground Railroad, a haven located perilously close to slave-holding territory. Over his lifetime, it's estimated that he helped more than 2,700 people escape to freedom. Garrett was a man of deep moral conviction. He was caught and fined so heavily that he lost his entire fortune, but he famously declared to the judge that he considered it an honor and that if anyone knew of a person seeking freedom, they should be sent to him. His unwavering commitment provided Harriet with a reliable safe house and crucial resources right on the edge of the South. The partnership between Harriet, the on-the-ground operative, and men like Garrett and Still, the logistical organizers, was a perfect example of how different roles came together to create a powerful, functioning system of liberation. Harriet's circle of allies also included some of the most famous names in the abolitionist movement. She formed a powerful partnership with the great orator and writer Frederick Douglass. Having escaped slavery himself, Douglass understood the stakes better than anyone. He and Harriet shared a profound bond. He admired her courage immensely, once writing to her, "The midnight sky and the silent stars have been the witnesses of your devotion to freedom and of your heroism." He often sheltered Harriet and the people she guided at his home in Rochester, New York, which was one of the final stops before crossing the border into Canada and to true freedom. Their collaboration was a meeting of giants, Douglas using his powerful voice and pen to sway public opinion, while Harriet worked in the shadows, leading people directly out of bondage. But the alliance wasn't limited to prominent figures. The backbone of the Underground Railroad was a network of ordinary people who chose to do extraordinary things. Many of these were white allies, particularly Quaker families. The Quakers, or the Religious Society of Friends, had long been opposed to slavery on moral and religious grounds. Their beliefs in equality and nonviolence compelled them to act. All along the routes north, Quaker families opened their homes, turning them into stations. They hid freedom seekers in secret rooms, basements, and barns. They provided food, new clothes, and transportation, often using wagons with false bottoms to conceal their passengers. They faced immense risks, including hefty fines and imprisonment under the Fugitive Slave Act. Yet their faith gave them the courage to defy the law and follow their conscience. This quiet, steadfast network of Quaker families formed a chain of safe havens that stretched for hundreds of miles. This was truly a community united in defiance. It was a coalition of black and white, men and women, rich and poor. Free black communities in the North were absolutely essential. They formed vigilance committees to protect against slave catchers, raised funds, and provided shelter. Enslaved people on plantations also played a role, passing along secret information about safe routes and sympathetic individuals. This wasn't just a series of isolated acts of kindness. It was a coordinated grassroots resistance movement. Every person who offered a meal, pointed the way, or kept a secret was a vital link in the chain. The story of Harriet Tubman's allies teaches us a powerful lesson about the nature of change. It shows that monumental achievements are rarely the work of a single individual. They are the result of a community, a collective effort of people from different backgrounds coming together for a common purpose. Harriet was the conductor, the Moses of her people, but her train was fueled by the courage and compassion of countless others. William Still, Thomas Garrett, Frederick Douglass, and the scores of unnamed Quaker families and free black activists were all co-conspirators in the grand enterprise of freedom. They demonstrated that in the face of overwhelming injustice, unity and alliance are our most powerful weapons. Their story is a testament to the idea that when people stand together, they can indeed change the world. Thank you so much for joining me for this chapter. The story of these alliances is a crucial part of Harriet's legacy. If you found this inspiring, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel for more. We'd love to have you as part of our community. See you next time. Hello everyone and welcome back to our channel. Today, we are diving deep into a topic that is both powerful and profoundly inspiring: the unique leadership style of Harriet Tubman. We often hear about her as the Moses of her people, a conductor on the Underground Railroad. But what was it actually like to be led by her through the perilous journey to freedom? Let's explore the woman behind the legend. Imagine this. You've spent your entire life in bondage. The idea of freedom is a distant, almost mythical concept. Now you've made the terrifying decision to run. You're in the dead of night. Every shadow looks like a threat. Every rustle of leaves sounds like a slave catcher. The person leading you isn't a towering general, but a small woman, barely over 5 feet tall. This was the reality for the hundreds of people Harriet Tubman guided. How did she command such respect and ensure absolute success on these life-or-death missions? The answer lies in a fascinating blend of iron will and deep compassion. Harriet Tubman was, without a doubt, a firm and disciplined leader. There was no room for error. A single mistake, a moment of hesitation, could mean capture, re-enslavement, or worse for the entire group. She established rules, and those rules were absolute. She planned her routes meticulously, often relying on her deep knowledge of the wilderness, her faith, and a network of trusted allies. She would often travel in the dead of winter when the nights were longest and patrollers were less likely to be out. She knew which doors to knock on and which to avoid. This level of preparation and discipline was the bedrock of her success. This brings us to one of her most famous and perhaps most chilling declarations: "You, well, be free or die." This wasn't just a dramatic phrase. It was a non-negotiable term of the journey. Why was she so absolute? Because the stakes were impossibly high. If one person turned back, they could be tortured into revealing the roots, the safe houses, and the identities of those who helped. A single person's fear could condemn everyone. So Harriet carried a pistol, and she made it clear that turning back was not an option. It was a stark, brutal choice, but it was born out of a desperate necessity to protect the group and the future of the entire Underground Railroad network. It was the ultimate expression of her commitment. Failure was simply not an option. Now it's easy to hear that and picture a cold, ruthless leader. But that's only half the story. The other half is filled with incredible compassion. Harriet wasn't a detached commander. She was a fellow sufferer who had walked the same path. She knew the terror that gripped the hearts of the people she led. She had felt the same gnawing hunger, the same bone-deep exhaustion. This shared experience was the source of her profound empathy. Eyewitness accounts from those she rescued paint a picture of a deeply caring guide. She would carry the children on her shoulders when they were too tired to walk. She would use her knowledge of herbal remedies to tend to the sick and injured. She would tell stories of freedom and sing spirituals in a low, quiet voice to boost morale and calm frayed nerves. These songs often contained coded messages signaling safety or danger ahead. She was a provider, a nurse, a storyteller, and a spiritual guide all rolled into one. She was the steady hand in the dark, the reassuring voice when hope was dwindling. This duality is what made her leadership so effective. Her firmness inspired respect and obedience, ensuring the group's safety. Her compassion inspired trust and courage. The frightened fugitives she led weren't just following orders. They were following someone they believed in, someone who understood their deepest fears and their most fervent hopes. They knew she would never ask them to do something she wouldn't do herself. They knew she had their ultimate well-being at heart, even when she was making terrifying demands. Think about the psychological impact of her leadership. These were people who had been systematically dehumanized, told they were property, incapable of making their own decisions. Harriet, through her actions, restored their agency. By placing her trust in them to follow her difficult path, and by showing them unwavering care, she helped them reclaim their own strength and humanity. Even before they officially crossed into the Free States, she wasn't just leading them to a place. She was leading them back to themselves. And the result of this incredible leadership style? It's a statistic that sounds almost impossible, but it's true. Over the course of about a decade, making an estimated 13 trips, Harriet Tubman guided more than 70 people to freedom, including her own elderly parents. And in all those treacherous journeys, through hostile territory with a bounty on her head, she never lost a single passenger. Not one. That is a perfect record. It's a testament not just to her skill and bravery, but to her unparalleled ability to inspire ordinary people to do extraordinary things. She didn't just show them the way. She gave them the courage to take it. Harriet Tubman's leadership teaches us that true strength isn't just about being tough or making demands. It's about combining that strength with empathy, understanding, and a genuine care for the people you lead. She proved that you can be both firm and compassionate, a disciplinarian and a nurturer. Her legacy isn't just in the number of people she freed, but in the powerful example she set of what one determined, courageous, and deeply human leader can accomplish against all odds. Thank you so much for joining me today to explore this facet of Harriet Tubman's incredible life. Her story is a deep well of inspiration, and we've only scratched the surface. If you found this video insightful, please give it a thumbs up, and consider subscribing to the channel for more deep dives into history's most fascinating figures. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you won't miss our next video. We'll see you in the next one. Imagine, for a moment, that you've just escaped the darkest of circumstances. You've tasted freedom, something you've only ever dreamed of. What would you do next? Would you build a new life for yourself, far away from the horrors of the past? Or would you turn back, risking everything you've gained to help those you left behind? This wasn't a hypothetical question for Harriet Tubman. It was her reality, and her choice defines her legacy. Welcome back to our series on the life of this incredible woman. Today, we're delving into Chapter 13, Personal Sacrifice and Hardship. This is where we see the true cost of her heroism. After her own daring escape, Harriet didn't just settle into a quiet, safe life in the North. That was never an option for her. Instead, she became a conductor on the Underground Railroad, a path fraught with unimaginable peril. But what many people don't realize is the profound personal cost she paid with every single journey. Harriet lived in a state of self-imposed poverty. She worked tirelessly at menial jobs, a cook, a laundress, a domestic worker, not to build a comfortable life for herself, but to save every penny. Each dollar earned was a dollar closer to funding her next rescue mission. Think about that. The money that could have bought her a warm coat, a better meal, or a more secure home was instead funneled directly back into the fight for freedom. Her own comfort was secondary to the liberation of others. She would save up just enough to cover travel expenses, to buy food for the fugitives she guided, and to bribe those who might stand in their way. This wasn't a one-time donation. It was her entire way of life. She sacrificed her own well-being day in and day out, for the well-being of people she hadn't even met yet, bound only by a shared dream of freedom. This level of selflessness is almost beyond comprehension. She literally invested her life's earnings into the lives of others. And the financial sacrifice was, in many ways, the least of her worries. The most constant and terrifying companion on her journeys was the ever-present threat of capture. As Moses, her reputation grew, and so did the price on her head. At one point, the bounty for her capture was a staggering $40,000, an astronomical sum for that time. Every step she took back into the South was a step into the jaws of death. She was a wanted woman, hunted by slave catchers and patrollers who would have shown her no mercy. Every rustle of leaves, every barking dog in the distance, every stranger's glance could have signaled her end. She had to travel by night, navigating through dense forests and treacherous swamps, often in freezing weather. The physical and psychological toll of this constant, high-stakes danger is hard to fathom. She wasn't just risking her freedom. She was risking a brutal and public death. Yet she made this journey not once, not twice, but an estimated 13 times, guiding around 70 people, including her own family, to freedom. She never lost a single passenger. This flawless record wasn't luck. It was a testament to her incredible skill, courage, and the immense pressure she operated under. She stared death in the face repeatedly, for the simple reason that she believed no one should be enslaved. On top of the external dangers and financial struggles, Harriet was also fighting a constant internal battle. The severe head injuries she sustained as a teenager continued to plague her throughout her life. This injury caused sudden, debilitating sleeping spells, which we now understand were likely a form of epilepsy. Imagine the terror of this condition in her line of work. At any moment, without warning, she could fall into a deep sleep, leaving herself and the people she was guiding completely vulnerable. She could be in the middle of a dense forest, hiding from a patrol, and suddenly be overcome by this uncontrollable urge to sleep. Her fellow travelers would have to stand guard over her, shaking her, trying desperately to wake her until the episode passed. These spells were not just an inconvenience. They were a life-threatening liability. Yet she never allowed this chronic health problem to become an excuse. She didn't let it stop her. Instead, she incorporated it into her faith, believing that during these spells, she received divine visions and guidance from God that helped her navigate the treacherous paths to freedom. She transformed what could have been a fatal weakness into a source of spiritual strength. So let's paint the full picture. Here is a woman living in poverty by choice, channeling all her resources into her cause. She is constantly hunted, with a massive bounty on her head, risking a terrible death with every move. And she is doing all of this while battling a serious, unpredictable neurological condition that could incapacitate her at any moment. The sheer weight of these combined hardships is immense. Any one of these challenges would have been enough to deter the average person. But Harriet Tubman was anything but average. What this chapter of her life reveals, more than any other, is the unshakable core of her determination. Her resolve was not just strong, it was absolute. It was forged in the fires of her own suffering and fueled by a deep, abiding faith and an unquenchable thirst for justice. Her personal hardships didn't weaken her, they seemed to strengthen her. They stripped away everything but her essential purpose, to lead her people to freedom. She knew the risks, she felt the pain. She lived with the fear, but her spirit simply refused to be broken. Her determination wasn't a fleeting emotion. It was the very essence of her being. Harriet's story is a powerful reminder that heroism isn't about the absence of fear or hardship. It's about acting in spite of them. It's about a commitment to a cause so profound that personal sacrifice becomes not a burden, but a necessary and willing offering. Her life challenges us to ask ourselves, what do we believe in so strongly that we would be willing to sacrifice for it? Harriet Tubman knew her answer, and she lived it every single day. Her legacy is not just in the people she saved, but in the powerful example of what one determined individual can endure and achieve in the face of overwhelming adversity. Thank you so much for joining me today to explore this deeply moving part of Harriet Tubman's life. Her story is one that deserves to be told and retold. If you found this video insightful, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to our channel for more deep dives into history's most inspiring figures. Don't forget to hit that notification bell so you won't miss our next chapter. We'll see you in the next video. Welcome back to our series. Today we're diving into Chapter 14, the wider impact of the Underground Railroad. This isn't just a story about secret routes and safe houses. It's about a movement that shook the very foundations of a nation and redefined the meaning of freedom for countless individuals. The most direct and powerful impact of the Underground Railroad was, of course, the thousands of lives it transformed. Imagine for a moment living under the constant threat of bondage, where your family, your labor, and your very identity are not your own. Now picture a glimmer of hope, a whispered rumor of a path to freedom. For thousands of enslaved people, the Underground Railroad turned that rumor into reality. Each person who successfully made the journey north represented a profound victory against an oppressive system. They weren't just escaping. They were reclaiming their lives, their futures, and their humanity. These weren't just numbers. They were mothers, fathers, sons, and daughters who went on to build new lives, establish communities, and become powerful advocates for abolition themselves. The freedom of one person sent ripples of change through generations. Beyond the individuals who physically traveled its paths, the Underground Railroad became a powerful symbol of hope and resistance for millions still enslaved. In the darkest corners of the plantations, where hope was a scarce commodity, stories of the railroad were passed in hushed tones. These weren't just tales of escape. They were epics of courage, resilience, and defiance. They proved that the system of slavery was not invincible. They showed that there were people, both black and white, willing to risk everything for the cause of liberty. This network demonstrated that resistance was possible, that freedom was a goal worth striving for, no matter the danger. It fueled the spirit of defiance and kept the dream of emancipation alive in the hearts of those who suffered most, giving them a psychological and spiritual lifeline in a world designed to break them. While it was a beacon of hope for the enslaved, the Underground Railroad sparked fear and fury among Southern slaveholders. To them, this network wasn't a righteous cause. It was an organized theft of their property. The successful escapes represented a direct challenge to their authority and a significant economic loss. They saw the conductors and station masters not as heroes, but as criminals and agitators, inciting rebellion and undermining their entire way of life. This growing paranoia led to increasingly desperate measures. Slave patrols were strengthened, laws became more draconian, and the hunt for fugitives intensified. The rage of the slaveholding class wasn't just about lost labor, it was about the crumbling of their control. The very existence of the railroad was a constant, infuriating reminder that their power was not absolute, and that the people they oppressed were actively fighting back. This clash of ideologies, freedom on one side, bondage on the other, pushed the nation closer to its breaking point. The Underground Railroad wasn't some fringe movement. It was a major factor in the escalating national conflict over slavery. Every escape and every story published in Northern abolitionist papers added fuel to the fire. Northerners were confronted with the brutal reality of slavery through the first-hand accounts of fugitives, turning many against the institution. Southerners, in turn, saw the North as a hostile territory that harbored fugitives and encouraged insurrection. This deep-seated animosity poised national politics, making compromise impossible. The tensions exacerbated by the railroad directly contributed to landmark events like the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850, which legally obligated citizens, even in free states, to assist in the capture of escaped slaves. This law, meant to appease the South, instead outraged the North and galvanized the abolitionist movement. The Underground Railroad laid bare the irreconcilable differences between the North and South, drawing the battle lines for the conflict that was to come. So, when we look back at the Underground Railroad, we see more than just a secret network. We see a powerful catalyst for change. It was a lifeline that delivered thousands to freedom, a symbol that inspired millions, and a source of conflict that deepened the divisions in a nation at war with itself. It demonstrated the incredible power of ordinary people united by a common moral purpose to challenge an unjust system. The brave men and women of the Underground Railroad didn't just help people escape. They helped chart the course toward a more just future, forever altering the landscape of American history. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive. The story of the Underground Railroad is a testament to the enduring power of hope and the human spirit as unyielding desire for freedom. If you found this chapter enlightening, please hit that like button and be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next installment. See you in the next video. Welcome back to our journey through the incredible life of Harriet Tubman. We've followed her escape from bondage and her courageous missions leading others to freedom on the Underground Railroad. But her fight didn't end there. When the nation was torn apart by the Civil War in 1861, a new, even more dangerous chapter of her life began. This wasn't just a war for Harriet. It was the culmination of her life's work, the ultimate battle against the institution that had defined and oppressed her people for centuries. Many know Harriet as Moses, the conductor, but few know the story of Harriet the soldier, the spy, the commander. Today, we delve into the untold story of Harriet Tubman during the American Civil War. When the first shots were fired at Fort Sumter, Harriet Tubman knew instantly where she needed to be, on the front lines of the fight for freedom. She wasn't content to sit on the sidelines. She traveled to Union-occupied territory in South Carolina, a hotbed of conflict and a place teeming with formerly enslaved people seeking refuge behind Union lines. She didn't arrive with a title or an official commission, just with her unshakable resolve and a reputation that preceded her. Initially, she put her skills to work in the most immediate ways possible. She became a nurse, tending to soldiers racked with diseases like dysentery and smallpox. Using the knowledge of herbal remedies she had learned as a child in the forests of Maryland, she concocted treatments from local plants like water lily and cranesbill, saving countless lives when conventional medicine failed. She also worked as a cook and a laundress, doing whatever was necessary to support the Union cause and the hundreds of newly freed people, known as contrabands, who were often neglected and in desperate need of care. But Harriet's unique skills were too valuable to be confined to a hospital or a kitchen. Union officers quickly recognized that the same abilities that made her a master of the Underground Railroad, her knowledge of the terrain, her ability to move undetected, her vast network of contacts, and her sheer bravery made her the perfect candidate for espionage. She was recruited to organize a network of scouts and spies among the local black population. These men, often former river pilots and laborers, knew the Low Country's labyrinthine rivers, swamps, and marshes better than anyone. They could slip behind Confederate lines, gather crucial intelligence on enemy positions, troop movements, and supply lines, and return without a trace. Harriet was the linchpin of this operation. She coordinated their efforts, debriefed them, and relayed the vital information to Union commanders. She moved through the shadows, a ghost in the enemy's backyard, proving that intelligence was just as powerful as ammunition. She was respected by generals and foot soldiers alike, who were in awe of her courage and strategic mind. She wasn't just helping the war effort. She was actively shaping its strategy in the South. Her most legendary contribution, however, came in June of 1863. This was where Harriet Tubman transitioned from a spy to a military leader. Working with Colonel James Montgomery, a fellow abolitionist, she helped plan and lead an audacious raid along the Combahee River. This was no mere scouting mission. It was a full-blown military operation. Harriet had gathered critical intelligence pinpointing the locations of Confederate torpedoes or mines in the river. On the night of the raid, she guided 3 Union gunboats, the Asterisk John Adams Asterisk, the Asterisk Sentinel Asterisk, and the Asterisk Harriet A. Weed Asterisk up the treacherous waterway past the hidden explosives. As the gunboats steamed inland, they sounded their whistles. This was the signal Harriet had arranged. Enslaved people on the surrounding plantations, hearing the call, knew that freedom had arrived. They dropped their tools and ran for the riverbanks. The scene was one of chaos and jubilation. Hundreds, then over 700 men, women, and children swarmed the river's edge, desperate to board the Union ships. Confederate troops, taken completely by surprise, tried to mount a defense but were overwhelmed. The Union forces, guided by Harriet's plan, torched plantations, destroyed storehouses, and confiscated valuable supplies, dealing a significant economic and psychological blow to the Confederacy. The Combahee River Raid was a stunning success, and Harriet Tubman was at its very heart. A newspaper article at the time celebrated the feat, noting it was the first major military campaign in American history planned and led by a woman. She had not only navigated the ships to safety and guided the attack, but she had also orchestrated the liberation of over 750 people in a single night. Imagine the sight. Harriet standing on the deck of a gunboat, watching as families who had only known bondage scrambled aboard towards a new life. It was the Underground Railroad on a scale she could have only dreamed of, executed with military precision. Many of the able-bodied men who were freed that night immediately enlisted in the Union Army, turning to fight the very system that had enslaved them. Harriet had not just freed people. She had delivered a new battalion of soldiers to the cause of liberty. She had proven, beyond any doubt, that her fight was America's fight, and her leadership was an indispensable asset to the Union victory. For the remainder of the war, Harriet continued her tireless work. She participated in other raids, continued her espionage activities, and nursed the sick and wounded, including members of the famed 54th Massachusetts Infantry after their valiant but costly assault on Fort Wagner. She was everywhere, doing everything, driven by a singular purpose. Yet, despite her incredible service that went far beyond what was asked of any soldier, her contributions were largely overlooked by the government she served. After the war, she fought for years to receive a pension for her military service. It was a long and frustrating battle. While she was eventually granted a nurse's pension, she was never fully compensated for her unique and invaluable role as a scout, spy, and military leader. The official records struggled to define her, to fit her into a conventional box. How could they? There was nothing conventional about Harriet Tubman. Harriet's service during the Civil War is a powerful testament to her unwavering commitment to freedom. She saw the war not as a separate event, but as the final, decisive battle in the long struggle she had been waging her entire life. She risked her life not for glory or recognition, but for the simple, profound belief that all people deserve to be free. Her story redefines what it means to be a soldier and a patriot. She fought with intelligence, courage, and a deep, abiding love for her people. The image of Harriet leading a military raid is just as important as the image of her, leading people through the dark woods to the north. Both are chapters in the same epic story of a woman who is truly a force of nature, a leader whose impact on American history is still being fully understood. Thank you for joining us for this chapter. If you found this story as inspiring as we do, please hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and ring the bell so you don't miss the final parts of her incredible life story. We'll see you next time. Hello and welcome back to our series where we delve into the lives of history's most remarkable figures. Today we're re-exploring one of the most astonishing chapters in the life of Harriet Tubman, a moment where she was not just a conductor on the Underground Railroad, but a military leader who orchestrated one of the most successful intelligence operations of the Civil War. This is the story of the Combahee River Raid. By 1863, the Civil War was raging. Harriet Tubman, already a legend for her bravery in freeing the enslaved, had offered her services to the Union Army. While she initially served as a nurse and a cook, her unparalleled knowledge of the southern terrain and her extensive network of contacts among the enslaved population made her an invaluable asset. The Union command, particularly in the Department of the South, began to recognize that Harriet possessed a unique skill set that went far beyond traditional roles. They saw in her a master of espionage and strategy. She was dispatched to Port Royal, South Carolina, a Union-held enclave deep in Confederate territory. Her mission was to gather intelligence. For months, Harriet moved through the shadows of the Low Country, organizing a network of scouts and spies. She mapped out Confederate positions, identified supply lines, and most importantly, learned the locations of torpedoes, what we would now call mines that the Confederates had planted in the rivers to stop Union gunboats. She gained the trust of the local enslaved people, who provided her with critical information that was invisible to the Union Army. They knew the land, the waterways, and the movements of their enslavers. Harriet was the bridge that connected this vital, untapped intelligence to the Union military command. The plan she helped formulate was audacious. It wasn't just about disrupting enemy supply lines, it was a mission of liberation. The target was the rich plantation country along the Combahee River, a place where hundreds of people were held in bondage, forced to produce rice and other goods for the Confederate war effort. Colonel James Montgomery, an abolitionist commander known for his aggressive tactics, was chosen to lead the military side of the operation. He listened to Harriet, recognizing her expertise and trusting her intelligence completely. She wasn't just a guide, she was a key planner of the entire raid. On the night of June 1, 1863, under the cover of darkness, the operation began. 3 Union gunboats, the USS Sentinel, the USS Harriet A. Weed, and the USS John Adams, steamed up the Combahee River. Harriet Tubman was on board the John Adams, standing alongside Colonel Montgomery, her knowledge guiding their path through the treacherous, mine-laden waters. Her network had done its job perfectly. She knew exactly where the Confederate torpedoes were hidden, allowing the flotilla to navigate the river safely. As the gunboats moved deeper into enemy territory, they began their assault. Small squads of soldiers went ashore, setting fire to the plantations, destroying bridges, and tearing up railroad tracks. The primary targets were the symbols and infrastructure of the Confederacy, the grand houses, the storehouses filled with cotton and rice, and the transportation links that fed the war machine. The fires lit up the night sky, creating a scene of controlled chaos, but this destruction had a deeper purpose. It was a signal. Word of the raid spread like wildfire through the enslaved communities along the river. This was the moment they had been waiting for. For years, they had heard whispers of freedom, tales of the Moses who led her people north. Now Moses was here, at their doorstep, with the full force of the Union Army behind her. As the plantations burned, the enslaved people began to run. They ran from the fields, from the cabins, from the big houses. They poured out towards the riverbanks, their eyes fixed on the Union gunboats that represented their salvation. The scene at the river's edge was one of pure, unadulterated hope and desperation. Hundreds of men, women, and children gathered, some carrying their few belongings, others carrying nothing but the hope of a new life. On the deck of the gunboat, Harriet Tubman watched them come. She later described the sound a chorus of prayer, cries of joy, and the panicked squeals of pigs and chickens they brought with them. The chaos was immense, but Harriet was a calming presence. She directed the people, helping them board the crowded steamers, ensuring that the elderly and the children were brought on safely. She had a unique ability to command respect and trust, even in the most frantic of situations. The Confederate slaveholders and soldiers were caught completely by surprise. They tried to mount a resistance, firing on the fleeing people and the gunboats, but their efforts were disorganized and ineffective against the well-planned Union assault. They could only watch in fury as their property, the foundation of their wealth and way of life, literally sailed away from them. By the time the sun rose on June 2nd, the mission was complete. The gunboats steamed back down the Combahee River toward Union lines at Beaufort. On their decks were more than 750 newly freed people. In a single night, Harriet Tubman, a woman born into slavery, had planned and led a military operation that resulted in one of the largest single liberations of the entire war. She had crippled the local Confederate economy, gathered crucial intelligence, and, most importantly, delivered hundreds of people to freedom. The success of the Combahee River raid was a monumental achievement. It was a stunning demonstration of Harriet's strategic mind and her profound courage. She had proven herself not only as a scout but as a brilliant military tactician. For the Union, it was a major victory, both militarily and morally. It showed the power of combining military force with local intelligence and a commitment to liberation. For the formerly enslaved, it was the first day of a new life, a tangible realization of the promise of emancipation. News of the raid spread, and while Harriet Tubman's name wasn't always at the forefront of the official reports, those who were there knew the truth. They knew that the success of the mission rested on the shoulders of this small, determined woman. A newspaper report at the time praised the Black She-Moses, calling her the moving spirit of the entire enterprise. It was a rare public acknowledgement of a black woman's leadership in the war. The Combahee River raid stands as a powerful testament to Harriet Tubman's multifaceted genius. She was a liberator, a spy, a strategist, and a soldier. She shattered every stereotype and expectation of what a woman, particularly a black woman, could be and do in the 19th century. Her work on the Combahee was a triumph that highlighted her immense importance to the Union cause and solidified her legacy as one of the most heroic figures in American history. It was a raid for freedom, planned and guided by the woman who had dedicated her entire life to that singular, powerful idea. Thank you so much for joining us for this incredible story. If you found this chapter of Harriet Tubman's life as inspiring as we do, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into the lives of history's heroes. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. We'll see you next time. Welcome back to our series. Today, in Chapter 17, we journey into the life of Harriet Tubman after the deafening silence of the Civil War fell across the nation. What happens to a hero when the battle is won? For Harriet, the fight was far from over. It simply changed form. She found a home in Auburn, New York, a place she had purchased before the war. This small plot of land wasn't just soil and a roof. It was a sanctuary. It was here she brought her elderly parents, providing them with a haven of peace after a lifetime of turmoil. Imagine, after leading so many to freedom, her most personal mission was to give her own family the quiet life they had always been denied. This piece of land in Auburn became a symbol of her enduring commitment, a physical manifestation of the freedom she fought so hard for. It was a place to finally put down roots, not just for herself, but for her loved ones. But freedom, as Harriet quickly learned, didn't automatically mean prosperity. Despite her incredible service as a scout, spy, and nurse for the Union Army, her heroism went largely unrecognized by the government, at least in a financial sense. She faced immense struggles. For years, she petitioned for back pay and a pension for her military service, a battle that would stretch on for decades. It's a shocking truth that this woman, who had risked her life countless times for the Union cause, had to fight for the basic compensation she was owed. She survived on the modest income from her small farm, selling produce, and with the help of supporters and friends who recognized her true worth. This period highlights a harsh reality. Even for a figure as monumental as Harriet Tubman, the post-war years were a constant struggle for survival and dignity. Yet financial hardship never dimmed her spirit or her purpose. Instead of retreating, Harriet expanded her mission. Her home in Auburn became more than just a family residence. It transformed into a hub of community care. She opened her doors and her heart to anyone in need. Her focus shifted to advocating for the most vulnerable, newly freed slaves struggling to build new lives, children left orphaned by the war, and the elderly who had no one else to care for them. She understood that political freedom was just the first step. True freedom meant having a community, a support system, and a place to call home. Her own struggles only deepened her empathy, and she channeled every bit of her energy into lifting others up. Harriet's life was a masterclass in simple living and profound generosity. She never sought wealth or fame. The same resourcefulness that had guided her through the treacherous paths of the Underground Railroad was now used to stretch a dollar to turn a small garden into a feast for many, and to make her humble home a palace of hope. Stories tell of her sharing the last of her food, of giving away her own belongings to someone she felt needed them more. Her life was an unbroken chain of service. She saw a need, and she met it, without fanfare or expectation of reward. Her payment was in the well-being of her community. This wasn't a new chapter for her. It was a continuation of the same life she had always led, one dedicated entirely to the service of others. As she grew older, her vision for a permanent place of refuge solidified. She dreamed of creating a home specifically for the aged and indigent among the African American community. This wasn't just a fleeting thought. It was the culmination of her life's work. In 1896, she purchased a 25-acre property adjoining her own land. This was a bold move for a woman of her means and age. She poured everything she had into this project. But the task of building and running such an institution was monumental. Recognizing she couldn't do it alone, she eventually deeded the property to the African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church, ensuring her dream would outlive her. In 1908, the Harriet Tubman Home for the Aged was officially opened, a lasting monument to her unwavering compassion. Harriet's advocacy extended beyond her immediate community. She became a powerful voice in other social movements of her time, most notably women's suffrage. She worked alongside prominent suffragists like Susan B. Anthony and Emily Howland. At suffrage meetings, her presence was electric. When she spoke, people listened. She would draw powerful parallels between the fight for racial equality and the fight for women's right to vote. She would often be asked, "Harriet, do you believe women should have the vote?" And her reply was simple and profound: "I've suffered enough to believe it." She argued that she had earned her right to full citizenship through her service and sacrifice, just as any man had. Her voice lent a unique and undeniable moral authority to the movement, reminding everyone that the fight for justice must include all people. Harriet lived out her final years in the very home she had worked so tirelessly to create. Surrounded by the communities she had built and cared for, she became a living legend. People would travel to Auburn just to meet the Moses of her people. She would sit and tell stories of her time on the Underground Railroad, of the war, and of the long, hard-fought journey to freedom. These weren't tales of bitterness or regret, but of faith, courage, and an unshakable belief in the power of perseverance. Her life became a testament to the idea that one person, armed with conviction and love, could indeed change the world. She remained a beacon of strength and hope until her very last days. On March 10, 1913, Harriet Tubman passed away, leaving behind a legacy that is impossible to measure. She was buried with semi-military honors in Auburn's Fort Hill Cemetery. Her final words were reportedly, "I go to prepare a place for you." It was the perfect summation of her entire existence. From leading people to freedom in the North, to creating a home for her family, to establishing a refuge for the elderly, her life was one continuous act of preparing a place for others. She didn't just lead people out of bondage. She led them toward community, dignity, and a future filled with hope. So, as we close this chapter, we see that Harriet Tubman's life after the war was not a quiet retirement. It was the powerful, resonant third act of an epic story. She demonstrated that the end of a war is the beginning of the difficult work of building a just and compassionate society. Her story teaches us that heroism isn't confined to the battlefield. It's found in the quiet, daily acts of caring for one another. Harriet Tubman's later years were perhaps her most profound, proving that her fight for freedom was truly a lifelong commitment to humanity. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey into Harriet Tubman's incredible life. Her story is one that deserves to be told and retold. If you found this chapter meaningful, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into history. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next episode. We'll see you next time. Hello and welcome back to our series. Today, we read diving into a chapter of Harriet Tubman's life that often gets overlooked but is incredibly powerful, her fight for women's rights. We know her as the Moses of her people, a conductor on the Underground Railroad who risked everything for freedom. But did you know that once the Civil War was over, she didn't just retire? No, Harriet's fight for equality was far from finished. She channeled that same unshakable courage into a new battle, the women's suffrage movement. This might seem like a natural next step, but it was a complex and often challenging path. The fight for the right to vote was not always a unified front. After the Civil War, the 15th Amendment was passed, granting African American men the right to vote. This was a monumental victory, but it left a huge group of people out: women, both black and white. This created a painful split in the activist community. Some felt that any progress was good progress, while others, including many leading suffragists, felt betrayed that women were excluded. Imagine the tension. Lifelong allies suddenly found themselves on opposing sides of a heated debate. Where did Harriet Tubman stand in all of this? With her characteristic wisdom and unwavering belief in justice for all, she supported both. She celebrated the 15th Amendment as a critical step forward for black men, but she also knew the work was incomplete. She believed deeply that freedom and equality were not divisible. For Harriet, the right to vote wasn't a privilege for one group. It was a fundamental human right for everyone. So Harriet Tubman, already a legend in her own right, stepped onto a new stage. She joined forces with the giants of the women's suffrage movement. Women like Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton. Can you just picture that? Harriet, a woman who had faced down slave catchers and led armies, sharing a platform with these pioneering women. She wasn't just a symbol. She was an active, vocal participant. She began traveling and speaking at suffrage conventions, rallies, and meetings across the Northeast. When Harriet spoke, people listened. She didn't have a formal education, but she had something more powerful: the raw, undeniable truth of her own experience. Her speeches weren't filled with complex legal arguments. Instead, she told her story. She spoke of her life in bondage, of her perilous journeys to freedom, and of her service during the Civil War as a spy and a nurse. She would stand before audiences, a small woman with an immense presence, and connect the fight against slavery to the fight for women's suffrage. She had a simple, profound question that cut to the heart of the matter. She would often say something to the effect of, "I have suffered for this country. I have been a nurse, a spy, a soldier. I have done a woman's work, and I have done a man's work. Don't you think I have earned the right to vote?" It was a question that left audiences speechless. How could anyone argue with that? She was living proof that women were not just capable, but had already contributed immensely to the nation in every conceivable way. Her very presence challenged every stereotype about women being too fragile, too emotional, or too unintelligent to participate in politics. One of her most famous appearances was at a suffrage meeting in Geneva, New York, in 1896. By then, she was an elderly woman, but her spirit was as fiery as ever. She stood before the crowd and recounted her wartime efforts, reminding everyone that she had been on the front lines, risking her life for the Union. She wasn't just asking for a right. She was demanding what she had already earned through her own sweat, sacrifice, and blood. Her logic was irrefutable. If she was strong enough to lead a military raid, surely she was strong enough to cast a ballot. Her friendship with Susan B. Anthony is a particularly fascinating aspect of this period. These two women came from vastly different worlds. Anthony was a white, educated woman from a Quaker family in the North. Harriet was a formerly enslaved black woman from the South. Yet they shared a deep, mutual respect and a common goal. They understood that the fight for rights was interconnected. Anthony often introduced Harriet at events, and their public alliance sent a powerful message of solidarity, even if the broader movement was fractured by issues of race. Through her advocacy, Harriet Tubman broadened the definition of what it meant to be an activist. She proved that you didn't have to choose one cause. Her life was a testament to the idea of intersectionality, the understanding that different forms of discrimination, like racism and sexism, are linked and cannot be tackled in isolation. She fought for abolition because she was black. She fought for suffrage because she was a woman. For her, it was all part of the same struggle for human dignity and freedom. She didn't see them as separate movements. She saw them as two fronts in the same war for justice. Think about the incredible bravery this took. Even within the suffrage movement, black women often faced prejudice. They were sometimes asked to march at the back of parades or excluded from leadership roles. But Harriet, with her towering reputation, could not be ignored. She used her fame not for personal gain, but to keep the focus on the most important principle: equality for all. She was a constant, living reminder that the promise of America was unfulfilled as long as anyone was denied their basic rights. Her involvement in the women's rights movement shows us the true scope of her vision. She wasn't just fighting to end one specific injustice. She was fighting for a world where every single person could live a life of freedom, dignity, and self-determination. Her work didn't end with the Emancipation Proclamation or the last trip on the Underground Railroad. She continued to fight, to speak, and to inspire until her final days. Her legacy is not just one of freeing slaves, but of empowering all people. Harriet Tubman's work for women's suffrage is a crucial part of her story. It demonstrates the depth of her commitment to justice and the breadth of her impact on American history. She showed the world that the fight for freedom is never truly over, and that true liberation means liberation for everyone. Her voice, forged in the fires of slavery, became a clarion call for the rights of women, echoing a truth that remains just as relevant today. Thank you so much for joining us for this chapter. It's a powerful reminder that our heroes are often more complex and far-reaching than we imagine. If you found this story as inspiring as I did, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into history. We'd love to have you as part of our community. See you in the next video. Welcome back to our series. Today, we arrive at the final poignant chapter in the life of a true American icon, Harriet Tubman. As we explore her later years and enduring legacy, we'll see how the fire that fueled her fight for freedom never dimmed, even as the sun began to set on her remarkable journey. The decades following the Civil War and her heroic service as a spy and scout were, paradoxically, marked by hardship. The same woman who had risked everything to liberate others now faced the quiet struggle of poverty. The government she had served so bravely was slow to recognize her contributions, and for many years she did not receive the pension she was rightfully owed. Imagine that, a celebrated conductor on the Underground Railroad, a war hero struggling to make ends meet. It's a stark reminder that the fight for justice doesn't always end with a grand victory parade. Sometimes it continues in the quiet, daily battles for dignity and survival. But Harriet was never truly alone. The network she had built, the lives she had touched, and the people she had inspired formed a safety net of love and respect around her. Friends, fellow abolitionists, and supporters, including prominent figures like Sarah H. Bradford, who wrote Harriet's biography, recognized her plight. They rallied to her side, organizing fundraisers and campaigns to provide her with the financial support she needed. These efforts were more than just charity. They were a testament to the profound impact she had on her community and the nation. The very people she had fought for were now fighting for her, ensuring that this pillar of strength was not left to crumble. Through all these challenges, the poverty, the fight for her pension, the advancing years, Harriet's core remained unshaken. Her profound faith in God, which had been her compass in the darkest of nights on the Underground Railroad, continued to be her anchor. Her resilience, forged in the crucible of slavery and war, was unbreakable. She didn't grow bitter or resentful. Instead, she channeled her energy into caring for others. She established the Harriet Tubman Home for the Aged on property she purchased in Auburn, New York, creating a sanctuary for the elderly and infirm who had nowhere else to go. Even in her own need, her first instinct was always to serve. This wasn't just a project. It was the ultimate expression of her life's philosophy: to lift others up. Harriet's activism didn't stop with abolition. She became a passionate advocate for women's suffrage, working alongside leaders like Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton. She saw the fight for women's right to vote as a natural extension of the fight for freedom and equality. At suffrage meetings, her presence was powerful. When she spoke, people listened. Her stories weren't theoretical arguments. They were lived experiences of oppression and the unyielding quest for liberty. She would famously ask, "I have suffered for this country. Now I ask this country, will it suffer for me?" Her voice added a moral weight and a raw, undeniable truth to the movement, connecting the struggle for racial equality with the struggle for gender equality. As the 20th century dawned, Harriet Tubman was increasingly recognized as a living legend. Though her body was frail, her spirit was as formidable as ever. Visitors flocked to her home in Auburn, eager to hear her stories and sit in the presence of greatness. She was a living link to a pivotal, painful chapter of American history, a symbol of what one determined individual could achieve against impossible odds. Her home wasn't just a residence. It was a living museum, a classroom, a place of pilgrimage. The respect she commanded was immense, a far cry from the anonymity she required during her years on the railroad, but a fitting tribute to her lifetime of service. On March 10, 1913, Harriet Tubman passed away, surrounded by loved ones at the very home for the aged she had founded. She was in her early 90s. Her last words were reportedly, "I go to prepare a place for you." It was a fitting final echo of her life's work as a conductor, always leading people to a place of safety and promise. She was buried with military honors in Auburn's Fort Hill Cemetery, a final, formal acknowledgement from the country she had served with such courage and conviction. Her death was not an end, but a transition. Her physical presence was gone, but her legacy was just beginning to take root in the national consciousness. So, what is the legacy of Harriet Tubman? It's far more than just a collection of daring escapes. Her legacy is one of radical courage, the courage to defy an unjust system not once, but over and over again. It's a legacy of selfless leadership, where she put the safety of others before her own time after time. She wasn't just freeing people. She was empowering them, teaching them to be brave, showing them the path to their own liberation. Her legacy is also one of unwavering faith and resilience. She shows us that even in the face of systemic oppression and personal hardship, hope can be a powerful weapon. Her story teaches us that true strength isn't about the absence of fear, but about acting in spite of it. She was afraid every single time she went back south, but she went anyway. That is the essence of courage. Today, Harriet Tubman's name is synonymous with freedom and heroism. Schools and parks are named after her. Her life is the subject of books, films, and documentaries. Her image is slated to grace the $20 bill, a powerful symbol of her central place in the American story. But her most important legacy lives on in the ongoing struggle for justice and equality. Every activist who stands up against oppression, every person who lends a hand to someone in need, every individual who chooses courage over complacency is walking in the footsteps of Harriet Tubman. She set a standard for what it means to be a citizen, a leader, and a hero. Her life reminds us that history is not just made by presidents and generals in grand halls of power. It's also made by determined, courageous individuals in the shadows, on the run, and in the quiet corners of communities. Harriet Tubman, the woman they called Moses, didn't just lead her people out of bondage. She carved a path to a better future and left a map for all of us to follow. Her legacy is not a monument of stone, but a living, breathing call to action, urging us to continue the work, to fight for a more just world, and to never, ever give up. Thank you so much for joining us on this incredible journey through the life of Harriet Tubman. Her story is a powerful reminder of the impact one person can have on the world. If you found this series inspiring, please give this video a thumbs up and consider subscribing to our channel for more deep dives into the lives of historical figures who changed the world. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. What part of Harriet's story resonates most with you? Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. Hello everyone, and welcome back to our series. Today we've reached a significant point in our journey. Chapter 20, where we explore the enduring legacy of Harriet Tubman, the woman affectionately known as Moses. Her fight for freedom didn't end with the last person she guided north. In fact, her story was just beginning to echo through the generations. How do we remember a figure of such monumental importance? How does a legacy like hers continue to shape our world today? Let's delve into the ways Harriet Tubman's spirit lives on. After her passing, the nation and the world began the important work of remembrance. It wasn't just about preserving a name, but about honoring the principles she embodied: courage, selflessness, and an unyielding belief in human dignity. Across the United States, you can find tangible testaments to her impact. Monuments stand tall, capturing her determined gaze and steadfast posture, not as a conqueror, but as a liberator. Think of the powerful sculptures that depict her leading others out of bondage, her hand outstretched, her expression a mix of fierce resolve and gentle reassurance. These aren't just statues. They are public classrooms, teaching every passerby about a woman who risked everything for the freedom of others. But her legacy extends far beyond stone and bronze. It's woven into the very fabric of communities. All over the country, schools are named in her honor: Harriet Tubman Elementary, Tubman Middle School. Imagine the daily inspiration for young students, learning and growing in a place named after a woman who championed education and empowerment, even though she herself was denied a formal education. These schools serve as a constant reminder that one's circumstances do not define one's potential for greatness. What a powerful message to impart to the next generation. And it doesn't stop there. Parks and public spaces also bear her name. These are places of community, of recreation, of peace, the very things she fought to secure for her people. The Harriet Tubman Underground Railroad National Historical Park in Maryland, for instance, preserves the landscapes she navigated by starlight. Walking through those marshes and woods, you can almost feel the quiet tension, the rustling leaves that could signal either danger or safety. These preserved areas allow us to connect with her story on a deeply personal, physical level. They transform history from a collection of dates and facts into a lived, felt experience, allowing us to walk, for a moment, in her footsteps. Harriet Tubman has become more than a historical figure. She has transcended into a lasting, universal symbol. When we speak of courage in the face of overwhelming odds, her name comes to mind. When we discuss the fight for freedom and human rights, her story is a cornerstone. She is the ultimate embodiment of the idea that one person, armed with conviction and a moral compass, can indeed stand against a powerful, unjust system and win. Her nickname, Moses, is so fitting. Just as Moses led his people from slavery to a promised land, Harriet guided hundreds from the darkness of bondage to the light of freedom, never once losing a passenger on her perilous journeys. This symbolism is not confined to the past or to one country. Her story resonates globally. Activists and leaders in movements for justice and civil rights all over the world have drawn inspiration from her life. Her methods, a combination of grassroots organizing, strategic planning, and unwavering faith, provide a timeless blueprint for challenging oppression. When people stand up against tyranny, when they demand equality, when they create networks to protect the vulnerable, they are channeling the spirit of Harriet Tubman. She showed that liberation isn't just a grand abstract idea. It's built through countless small, brave acts, night after night, person by person. Her legacy is a living, breathing force in the ongoing struggle for a more just and equitable world. So, as we reflect on her incredible life, we are left with a profound and humbling truth. The story of Harriet Tubman is the story of how one woman's determination changed the course of history. She was born into the most oppressive circumstances imaginable, yet she refused to let her spirit be broken. She not only claimed her own freedom, but returned to the heart of danger time and time again to share that freedom with others. She was a conductor, a spy, a nurse, and a leader. She challenges each of us to ask ourselves, what is our role in the fight for justice? How can we use our own strengths, our own resources to make a difference? Her life proves that you don't need wealth, status, or a formal title to be a powerful force for good. All you need is a steadfast heart and the courage to act. Harriet Tubman's journey from an enslaved girl to an American icon is a testament to the power of the human spirit. She reminds us that history isn't just something that happens to us. It is something we can shape. Her legacy is not just in monuments and parks, but in every act of courage, every stand for justice, and every effort to help our fellow human beings find their own path to freedom. She didn't just change history. She invites us to continue changing it for the better, every single day. Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible journey through Harriet Tubman's life and legacy. Her story is one that deserves to be told and retold, and I'm so grateful to have shared it with you. If you found this series inspiring or learned something new, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more content like this. Your support helps us continue to share these important stories. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.